A lot of people ask me, how do mobile operators make money? What is their business model? I mean, to me, it seems so obvious. But then I try to start explaining it and I realize it's a bit of a story. So here it goes. All mobile operators have a very simple profit formula. Revenue minus spectrum costs minus capital spend minus operational spend equals profit. Before going on, let me first explain exactly how your phone connects to the internet. Every smartphone has two radio receivers, Wi-Fi and 5G. Just for clarity, sometimes it's 4G, sometimes it's 3G, nowadays it's 5G. When you see the Wi-Fi symbol on the top right-hand side of your screen, that means you're connected via Wi-Fi spectrum to a Wi-Fi router, probably in the same building as you are. That Wi-Fi router is connected to a fiber optic cable, which in turn connects the Wi-Fi router to the World Wide Web, to the internet. When you see the 5G symbol on your screen, that means you're connected to 5G spectrum to a 5G base station. Probably that base station's on a high building or in a mountain nearby. And in South Africa, that means either Vodacom, MTN, Cell C, Telkom Mobile or Rain owns that base station. That base station is connected to a fiber optic cable, which in turn connects you and that base station to the World Wide Web and the internet. So how does a fiber cable connect the base station to the internet? Let's assume that you type www.youtube.com on your smartphone. That means you have asked for information that resides at that web address to be sent to your phone. Your request is transmitted over the airwaves on 5G spectrum to the nearest 5G base station, which in turn passes on the request via fiber optic cables to the nearest data center. Assuming that data center doesn't have a copy of the landing page of youtube.com on its actual servers on its hard drive, it passes on the request via fiber optic cable to the CCOM landing station in Richards Bay, which then sends the message via undersea cable to a London data center. Assuming the London data center also doesn't have a copy of youtube.com, it passes on the request via another undersea fiber optic cable to New York, from where it is relayed via overland fiber optic cables across the North American continent to YouTube's servers at Google in its headquarters in San Francisco. The landing page information is then sent all the way back to your phone. All of this can happen in less than 1 second, depending on whether there are any bottlenecks along the way. Every leg of the chain is a potential bottleneck. Phone to 5G base station, 5G base station to Joburg, Joburg to Richards Bay, Richards Bay to London, London to San Francisco. Fortunately, for us users of the internet, there are very few bottlenecks left. Over the past 25 years, millions of kilometers of fiber optic cables have been laid across the world. Even in South Africa, we now have multiple fiber cables running between cities and under the sea, and we have enough capacity to carry traffic almost anywhere. The only bottleneck left that can slow down your internet experience is the wireless link from your device to the nearest 5G base station. Your cell phone connects with the base station over the airwaves wirelessly. The airwaves can become congested, they can become full, which then slows the transmission of data to and from your phone. In other words, it doesn't matter how fast the base station, the 5G base station, communicates with the rest of the world. The speed of the connection of your phone depends on whether there is enough space in the air between your phone and that 5G base station. Now, mobile operators can address this congestion problem in one of two ways. They can get more spectrum, or they can build more base stations. Either the mobile operator must acquire more 5G spectrum to handle the increased traffic, or the mobile operator must densify its network of base stations. Now, where do mobile operators acquire 5G spectrum? From the government, of course. Now, why does the government control spectrum? The world's airwaves are governed by an organization in Switzerland called the International Telecommunications Union, or the ITU. The ITU sets global standards for radio waves in order to ensure interoperability across countries for any equipment that operates wirelessly. This includes walkie-talkies, car radios, TVs, microwave ovens, and mobile networks. In order to ensure your phone works no matter where you are in the world, and to assist manufacturers to standardize radio equipment on your phone, the ITU allocates certain spectrum ranges for the exclusive use of mobile communication. Governments are then free to decide how they want to allocate the spectrum. No private individual or company may use this spectrum without government permission. And that's why Vodacom, MTN, Telkom Mobile, Cell C and Rain are always fighting about spectrum. Because it's their lifeblood. No spectrum, no business. In order to get spectrum, these companies pay license fees to the government. In order to justify the license fees, these operators must make a profit. They make a profit by selling minutes, SMSs and gigs to consumers like you and me. In other words, consumers like you and me are in fact paying the government for the use of licensed spectrum. We must bear that in mind when you read about spectrum auctions. Don't get too excited when you see mobile operators are forced to pay billions for spectrum allocations. If the likes of MTN and Vodacom are forced to pay government enormous sums in order to gain more spectrum, they simply pass those costs down to consumers who ultimately pay higher fees for phone calls and mobile internet. That's how spectrum works. Now to the other half of a mobile operator's business model, base stations. Each 5G base station has its own mini business model. Revenue minus capital spend minus operational spend equals profit. Revenue is calculated based on the number of minutes, SMSs and gigs sold, multiplied by the average retail rate for each category. For example, if in 1 year MTN sells 10 million minutes, 10 million SMSs and 100,000 gigs at an average retail rate of R1.80 per minute, 30 cents per SMS and 100 Rand per gig, respectively, then it will generate 31 million Rand in revenue. That's the total amount of money coming into the bank. Now you have to calculate the total amount of money going out of the bank. First, you must spend money building physical 5G base stations. Each base station requires a mast, requires a fence around the mast, radio panels, batteries, a control box, air conditioning, etc., etc. The total cost of a base station is what is referred to as the capital spend. Let's assume that is 5 million Rand. Next is the ongoing costs of running that base station, known as operational spend. This is all the expenditure related to keeping that base station functional, including electricity, rent, fiber connectivity, network monitoring, maintenance, security, etc., etc. Let's assume that's 6 million Rand. Therefore, for the purposes of probably my bad example, the total costs are 11 million Rand against total revenues of 31 million Rand, which leaves a profit of 20 million Rand. The important thing to understand is that neither the capital spend or operating spend are variable in a meaningful way. No matter how much traffic a base station carries, it still costs roughly the same to build and operate that base station. In other words, the only way a telco can increase profit is to either increase the number of minutes, SMSs and gigs sold per base station, or to increase the retail price of those minutes, SMSs and gigs. Bear in mind that there is a ceiling to the number of minutes, SMSs and gigs that a base station can carry based on the amount of spectrum available. Once the base station's spectrum allocation is full, it can't carry any more traffic. In other words, in the absence of increasing retail rates, which is kind of difficult for guys to do, the only way a telco can generate more revenue per base station is to get more spectrum and therefore be able to carry more traffic on that base station. Which once again illustrates why operators are so keen on spectrum. So, why is home fiber cheaper than mobile data? Well, firstly, home fiber doesn't require licensed spectrum and all the ancillary costs. The only wireless component of home fiber is the Wi-Fi spectrum that your phone uses to connect to your home Wi-Fi router. Wi-Fi spectrum is specifically designated by the ITU for public use globally. Compliance with ITU rules is a condition of membership of the World Trade Organization, also known as the WTO. That means governments that restrict the use of Wi-Fi spectrum are kicked out of the WTO, which means they can't trade globally, which is a bit of a bummer. Being classified as public spectrum means there are no Wi-Fi spectrum fees. There is no need to pay the government, which means there are no spectrum costs to recover from consumers, which means fiber companies can have much lower retail prices. Secondly, home fiber doesn't need base stations. Your Wi-Fi router plugs straight into the fiber, bypassing the need for a 3G or 4G or 5G base station. That means home fiber has no capital spent for 3G, 4G, 5G base stations, and no operating costs related to those base stations, for example, electricity, security, maintenance. Of course, you still have a bit of capital spend and a little bit of operating spend. The fiber network operator must install fiber into your home, but installing fiber is a lot cheaper than building a base station. And fiber lasts longer, it carries more traffic, it's faster, and it doesn't require electricity, which makes the home fiber profit formula so much better than that for mobile data. There's no spectrum costs, there's much less capital spend, there's much less operating spend, and hopefully that explains why home fiber is so much cheaper than mobile data. At the end of the day, it's just business. Companies exist to make a profit. In the world of telcos, the winners are the ones who build the biggest networks and can then load their networks to the most customers. The size of your network is a function of how much spectrum you have and how many base stations you build. The amount of spectrum and the amount of base stations you have is a function of how much money you have. And that's why my dad once told me, never start a telco unless you have a pile of cash.